The transmission crackled once, twice, then bled into silence. The Galactic Assembly stared at the final seconds of the footage on a loop. 12 human women, shackled in an amber-lit hangar aboard a Cassaro Dominion ship. One of them, blonde, calm, in a floral dress with a coffee stain on the sleeve, lifted her chin and stared into the camera. She didn't scream. She didn't weep. She mouthed one word. Really? A Cassaro administrator paused the loop. As you can see, he said dryly, mandibles twitching, the subjugation was successful. Minimal resistance. Containment stable. A hush clung to the chamber. A Delari ambassador, glass-skinned and ancient, rose trembling from her seat. You broke the accord, she said. The one rule. The administrator scoffed. Superstition. Superstition. A small rodent like Hecary squeaked from his perch. That superstition is why we still exist. You think the human wars ended because they grew wise. The Cassaro waved a claw. They're sentimental. Primitive. If we keep the breeding stock healthy. Did you just call them breeding stock? A new voice interrupted, smooth as bourbon and just as slow. Every head turned. From the shadows of the chamber's far wall stepped a man in a crisp blue jacket, collar unbuttoned, tie loose. No insignia, no visible weapon, just a datapad and a travel mug with the words, World's Okayest Diplomat, scrawled in faded print. Ambassador Paul Maddox, Earth Council, he said cheerfully, setting the mug down with a soft clink. Sorry for the late arrival. Had to stop for coffee. Yours is still awful, by the way. The Cassaro administrator narrowed his eyes. You think this is amusing? No, Paul replied, taking his seat. I think you are. A few titters echoed among the Hecary. Even the Delari's lips twitched. Paul tapped his pad. A star map flickered to life, glowing with clusters of light. He zoomed in on Cassaro territory. One by one, sectors winked red. I won't bore you with a speech, Paul said, tone polite, almost apologetic. Just a question. He looked up, eyes warm and impossibly calm. Why did you take them? The administrator hissed. They were unguarded. Civilian females. Fertile. Right? Paul murmured, nodding. Civilian. He glanced toward a flickering image of the blonde woman again. That one, he pointed. Decorated linguist. 4 black belts. Taught 3 species how to disarm a plasma rifle with dental floss. She once ended a bar fight using only guilt and carrot cake. He swiped left. This one? Top cyber intelligence officer in her region. Disguised herself as a librarian because, quote, books make me look less stabby. Another swipe. That sweet old lady, he said, pausing on a gray-haired woman with spectacles. Bakes. Crochets. Took down a rogue Martian warlord with nothing but knitting needles and a prayer. The room was silent. They weren't just moms, Paul said softly. They were the moms. The ones who raised the humans who ended the Velker War in 6 hours. The ones who taught Earth's children that consequences are real. The ones who will hold your hand while you cry, then break every bone in your body because you messed with their babies. The Cassaro leaned forward, face smug. Then perhaps you should have protected them. Oh, we did, Paul replied. We just did it after you made the mistake. His datapad blinked. He didn't look at it. He just smiled. Across the galaxy, Cassaro systems began to dim. 14 hours earlier, in a quiet suburb outside Austin, Texas, Talia Haynes had just finished yelling at a drone delivery for crushing her dahlias. She was 37, wore sneakers with glitter laces, and had the permanent tired but determined look of someone who had argued with 3 school principals before breakfast. She'd once been a Marine combat strategist. Now she was head of the PTA, chair of the No Artificial Dyes Food Board, and currently missing her daughter's choir recital because she'd been abducted by giant insects. The alien cell was clean, sterile, and faintly lemon-scented. It had better air conditioning than her minivan, and Talia found that deeply insulting. Across the room, Annette, 47, piano teacher, Special Forces veteran, was doing push-ups in complete silence. "You think they're watching?" Talia muttered. "Oh yeah," Annette said, not missing a beat. "They're probably writing poetry about our muscle tone." Talia sat down on the bench and crossed her arms. "I bet Paul's on his way." "You think he's still alive?" "Of course. Takes more than war to kill that man. He survived a Thanksgiving at my aunt's. She served cranberry sauce with raisins." A soft clunk interrupted them. The cell door opened. A casserole entered, tall and glistening, holding a tablet. "You will comply," it said. "You are now part of the Dominion's fertility initiative." Annette stood up slowly. Talia smiled sweetly. "I'd like to file a formal complaint," she said. "With whom?" Talia's grin widened. "With your next of kin." The casserole didn't answer. Just blinked. They were used to screaming. Begging. Not jokes. The door sealed shut again. Annette exhaled. "Time. 2 hours till the signal," Talia said. They waited. Paul was always calm. It was the thing that unnerved aliens most. In a room full of fear, his voice stayed even. His hands never shook. He leaned back in his chair at the Galactic Assembly now, eyes closed, listening to the rising tension in the chamber as rumors crackled in through datapads and earpieces. The Casero delegation was suddenly quiet. Their flagship had just stopped responding. Paul sipped from his mug. "I tried to warn you," he said. "Earth isn't a planet. It's a promise." The Delari ambassador stepped forward. "What happens next?" Paul opened his eyes. "Have you ever tried interrupting a PTA meeting?" he said gently. "What?" "That's what's about to happen. Across your dominion. In every sector. All at once." The chamber dimmed. A single red glyph appeared on every screen. It was simple. 12 flowers. 12 names. A mother's vengeance. Paul rose. "Let me put this in language you'll understand." He walked toward the center of the room, unarmed and calm. "You didn't kidnap civilians. You lit a match in a room full of gasoline. You touched what wasn't yours." He stopped, looked the Casero administrator in the eye. "Do you know why the galaxy made that rule?" he asked. The administrator didn't answer. "Because the last time someone took our women," Paul whispered, "they didn't just lose. They disappeared. Every planet. Every moon. We buried them so deep in myth that you forgot it wasn't legend. It was history." The chamber trembled as lights flickered. "Earth remembers," Paul said. "And now, so will you." Somewhere far above, 12 Casero warships blinked off the galactic grid. Talia's communicator buzzed once on her wrist. She smiled. "Showtime." Annette cracked her neck. "Tea after this?" "Only if it's spiked." They moved together, silent and swift, disabling the field emitters with a magnetic pulse Talia had sewn into her hair clip. Alarms began to howl. One by one, the other women slipped into the corridor. Ready. Not screaming victims. Predators. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were mothers. They moved with purpose. And behind them, the Dominion burned. Paul stood at the window of the assembly now, watching stars flicker. "They'll try to retaliate," someone murmured. "They'll try," he said. Then, quietly, almost kindly, he added, "But they took the wrong PTA moms." The room they put him in was round, sterile, and humming with passive hostility. Walls that watched, doors that didn't open, and chairs bolted to the floor like trust was a luxury item. The lighting was soft blue, probably meant to soothe. Paul Maddox leaned back and kicked his boots up onto the table, unbothered. The air was too cold, the tea too bitter, and the silence just right. 3 Casero entered with ceremonial disdain, mandibles clacking and posture high, like they were walking into a courtroom they owned. One carried a rod of office, another a data slate, the third just glared with all the force his chitin armor could muster. Paul raised his cup. "Afternoon, gentlemen. Or do your people go by hive segment? I'm still catching up on interspecies pronoun etiquette." Your humor is unnecessary, the one with the data slate said. You are a detained representative of an aggressive species. Act accordingly. I am, Paul agreed. Accordingly polite, accordingly calm. You're the ones who kidnapped our civilians, remember. They are breeding candidates, the third Casero spat. Paul set his cup down, slow enough to let the sound carry. You're lucky I believe in diplomacy, he said. Because the last guy you said that to? His bones are somewhere on Pluto, and they're still warm. The Casero nearest him twitched. Paul leaned forward, voice calm and unflinching. I'm not here to start a war. I'm here to make sure you survive the one you've already started. Is that a threat? No. That's a favor. They stared at each other for a beat too long. The Casero tried again. You humans are impulsive. You react emotionally. Your history is one of instability, tribalism, and chaos. Paul smiled. Exactly. We're unstable, tribal, chaotic, and somehow, despite all that, we keep winning. Makes you wonder what we're like when we actually try. They didn't answer. Paul picked up his mug again. Your mistake wasn't underestimating us, he said. It was thinking we're like you. Outside, the ship rumbled faintly. Not a weapons charge. Not an engine pulse. Just something subtle. A pressure change. The kind of quiet before a chessboard flips. Far above them, beyond the sterilized hulls and diplomatic silence, floated a convoy of civilian-class Earth vessels. Except they weren't civilian. Not anymore. The Eleanor Rigby, Mildred's Wrath, and the Bake Sale incident were part of the matriarch fleet, a misnomer, like calling a viper a garden hose. Their hulls were lined with adaptive camouflage and signal scramblers. On the outside, they looked like repurposed shipping crates. On the inside, they housed Earth's sharpest military tacticians, disguised in floral shawls and labeled Grandma's Embroidery Club. The Dominion never saw them coming. Inside the lead ship, Captain Rima Patel, 61, hummed a Sinatra tune as she reviewed target coordinates. She'd been a field medic in 3 planetary wars and hosted monthly bingo. Her first strike command came with a badge, a pot roast recipe, and authorization to reduce threats to glitter. Her eyes narrowed. We're green, she said to her crew. On your mark, Mama Bear. Showtime. Back on the Casero cruiser, Talia ducked beneath a vent as patrols stormed past, speaking in rapid clicks. They'd been in hiding for 4 hours, slipping room to room, whispering plans between breathless silences. She checked her makeshift wrist panel. Annette, how's our little hack job doing? Still feeding false footage, came the reply in her ear. According to their cams, we're all still napping. Good. Let's keep them believing moms take naps. Another voice, quieter, joined in. I made it to the bridge, said Alice, the librarian. You were right, there's a food dispenser here with one button labeled nutrient sludge. I've never been more insulted. Talia grinned, sweat sticking to her collarbone. Prioritize sabotage. We'll complain to Galactic Yelp later. She reached the junction of 2 corridors and paused. Her memory, razor-sharp since her military days, recalled the map Paul had slid into her grocery bag weeks ago, buried between coupons and a note that read, just in case. Talia wasn't just a mom. She was a strategist in sneakers, a former war planner who'd once coordinated a moon evacuation with a baby strapped to her chest. And she was done being underestimated. Paul stared at the data slate now, where footage rolled from Casero broadcasts, edited images of their captives, sound muted, carefully curated. Interesting, he said, tapping it. This one looks like she's crocheting. Why would a prisoner be crocheting? She is adjusting to her role, the administrator replied. Paul raised an eyebrow. So she knit a noose? The screen flickered. The woman on display stood slowly. Behind her, 2 guards were unconscious. In her hands was a length of fiber cord, taut and red. Oh dear, Paul said, pretending surprise. Looks like she's misunderstood your hospitality. A Casero slammed the screen off. You will surrender your fleet. Paul's smile never faltered. You still think that's our fleet? He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small, polished coin. He flipped it once. Every casserole I followed it. Who do you think commands our response teams? Paul asked, casually letting the coin spin on the table. Our admirals? Generals? The room stayed silent. You think it's men in suits, deep voices, shaved heads? You think it's people like me? He leaned in. It's them. The women you took. The women we trained. The ones who pack school lunches and emergency grenades. The coin stopped spinning. And I'm here to tell you, they're already winning. Aboard the bake sale incident, Rima smiled as the countdown reached 0. Lasers disguised as heat vents ignited. 3 casserole war satellites disintegrated into pinwheels of molten slag. Earth's ships never fired a warning shot. They just started. They jammed communications with elevator music, broadcast How to Raise a Toddler to casserole battle screens, and overrode AI with cheery audio that said, "We're not angry, just disappointed." Entire Dominion fleets hesitated, not from damage, but confusion, which, in warfare, is fatal. By the time they regrouped, Earth had cracked their targeting systems like walnuts. Rima sipped cocoa. Send in the recipe viruses. Her second officer grinned. Yes, ma'am. Within seconds, every Dominion archive, military, engineering, historical, was overwritten by human PDF files labeled Mom's Meatloaf and Healing After Divorce, a journal. Back on the Cassereau Command Bridge, an urgent knock shattered the room's tense silence. A junior officer burst in, panting. Sir, we lost contact with 6 outer garrisons, all showing identical shutdown patterns. Sabotage, the administrator barked. The officer hesitated. They played dead, sir. Then the humans activated. The administrator turned to Paul, stunned. You set a trap? Paul shrugged. More like a lesson. But how? We let you take them, he said. The moment you boarded Earth's atmosphere, your fate was sealed. Impossible. Adorable, Paul replied. Talia kicked open the command bay door just as the ship lights flickered red. Her team filed in, Annette, Alice, Camila, and the rest, moving like wind through a field of hay. Quiet. Inevitable. Talia raised her voice. Hello, gentlemen. Welcome to the matinee performance of You Screwed with the Wrong Species. A young Cassereau lunged. Alice stunned him with a tablet to the head and murmured, Libraries closed. They took the room in 5 minutes. Talia stood at the center, breathing hard. The view outside showed chaos. Cassereau ships trying to regroup, humans everywhere, calm and unstoppable. She opened a channel. Paul, you there? He answered instantly. Hey, T. How's the weather? Bit cloudy, she said. We're in. Copy that. Round 2 starts in 10. Make it messy. Always. She grinned. Then paused, listening to the silence around her. The kind of silence you got just before something learned how dangerous you really were. She looked at the blinking coordinates on the ship's display, and saw something unexpected. A hidden file. Locked. Marked with a human encryption signature. She tapped it open. Lines of text. Classified. Location. Earth. Date. Before the abduction. Paul's voice echoed through a recorded message. If you're hearing this, it means they took the bait. Far away, Paul sat back as alarms rang and diplomats screamed. He glanced at his mug and whispered, more to himself than anyone else. Nice humans don't start wars. He smiled as the Cassereau homeworld blinked offline on the monitor. We finish them. The bridge of the Dominion flagship reeked of burnt circuits and arrogance. Screens flickered with static. Officers barked across failing consoles, trying to make sense of what was happening, but nothing worked as it should. Their precision had been shattered, not by brute force, but by mockery, by music, by files titled, How to Discipline a Toddler Without Killing the Planet. And then the video played. A soft chime rang out across every Casero vessel still online. Then a human voice, warm and measured, like a bedtime story read with deliberate care. This is Earth. You are now under disciplinary action. Please remain still while consequences are delivered. On the bridge of the Casero flagship, the Supreme Warlord's mandibles clicked in frustration. Where is the human? Paul Maddox was right behind him. Hi there, Paul said, casual as a picnic. Just dropped by. Hope I'm not interrupting. Weapons turned. The warlord spun. Half a dozen Casero soldiers pointed plasma rifles directly at Paul's chest. He didn't blink. Didn't even flinch. He looked tired. Not afraid. Just tired, like someone who'd given fair warning, and now had to follow through. I'd offer you a seat, he said, gesturing around the shattered room, but it looks like someone forgot to child-proof their empire. The warlord barked something in Casseroi. The weapons whined to full charge. Paul sighed. You should have kept them fed. That was your first mistake. Hungry women get creative. The Supreme Warlord stepped forward, for arms folded behind his back. You are one man. Paul nodded. Guilty. You came here alone? Not exactly, Paul said, tapping a button on his belt. Outside the viewport, the sky began to shift. One by one, civilian-class human vessels, disguised, battered, misnamed, peeled away their stealth coatings like snakes shedding skin. Underneath, warships. Dark, angular, smiling in the way only human designs could. No curves, no peace offerings. Just silent geometry made for ending arguments. One ship had "Bake Heretics Not Cookies" stenciled along the side in bright pink letters. The warlord's eyes widened. Impossible. Paul tilted his head. You really thought we'd let you take them without putting a tracker in every handbag? On cue, Alice's voice crackled through comms from the Dominion's secondary bridge. Tell him thanks for the muffins, she said. They made great cover for the drones. Annette chimed in. Control towers are down. Kitchens open. Talia's voice was last. Low, sure, unbothered. Ready when you are, Paul. He smiled. Ladies first. The warlord lunged. Paul sidestepped and let the warlord crash into a panel. A human stun knife appeared in Paul's hand, light humming with restraint. He wasn't here to kill. Not yet. Just to embarrass. With one motion, he dropped the warlord. The soldiers hesitated. Paul stood over the twitching body and looked up at the room full of officers. You still have a chance, he said. Leave your posts. Walk off the bridge. Go home. Apologize to your mother. No one moved. Suit yourself, he said, and threw the stun knife to the floor. It didn't clatter. It stuck. The metal was liquefying beneath them. The ship's interior tech was being rewritten by code smuggled in via craft paper and PDA fundraiser apps. The floor began to pulse faintly with human-made signals. Soft, grandmotherly wavelengths that didn't crash systems. They guilt them into surrender. Across the fleet, the human women struck. Talia burst into the Dominion's forward control room, ducked beneath an incoming bolt, and returned fire with a shock spray disguised as dry shampoo. A guard screamed as his weapon short-circuited, falling into convulsions. She didn't stop moving. Behind her, Annette moved like a ghost through blind spots, taking out command nodes with a plastic hairbrush rigged with sonic feedback. Camila rewired a control panel using 2 hairpins and a slice of chewing gum. This wasn't war. This was judgment. And every woman moved like she had waited her whole life for someone to break this particular rule. Paul sat in the command chair now, legs crossed, watching through the viewport as Casero ships veered off course, crashed into each other, or simply stopped transmitting. He hadn't fired a single round. He didn't need to. You didn't listen, he said quietly, not to the room but to the galaxy itself. We told you what happens. The ship AI pinged. A message from Earth. He opened it with a scan of his iris. A single line. Protocol babble cleared. Paul stared at it for a long moment, then stood up, the room still shivering beneath the decaying pride of a once formidable empire. "Looks like the vote came through," he said. The remaining Cassaro officers turned to him. "What vote?" one rasped. He smiled faintly. "The one we take whenever someone forgets history. Every few decades, someone decides Earth is soft. Every time, we give them a chance. A warning. A meeting." He looked at the cracked floor, then up again. "But once you touch the women, there's no more voting." In the Dominion's primary lab complex, 2 guards found themselves locked inside a cell built for prisoners. But this time, it was reversed. One of the human women had programmed the door to respond to sarcasm. "Try it," said the grandmotherly woman watching them. "Say something clever. Let us out." The door remained shut. "Humans are weak." "Nothing. We surrender?" It hissed open. "Good boys," she said, and walked away. Above the battlefields, human warships now rotated leisurely, as if the slaughter was incidental. One began broadcasting family photos. Another looped a PSA on how to use positive reinforcement instead of laser whips. Galactic diplomats watching from the sidelines whispered in horror. "They're not fighting. They're not even angry. They're just disappointed." Paul stepped off the bridge and found the hallway cleared. Talia stood there waiting, hand on her hip, shirt bloodied but eyes bright. "Nice of you to drop in," she said. "You're the ones doing all the work," he replied. "I'm just here for the press photos." She laughed. "A real one." Then sobered. "You know this won't be the last." "I know." She stepped beside him, shoulder brushing his. "What's protocol, Babel?" He hesitated, then handed her the message. She read it, and stilled. "You said we were just here to teach them a lesson." "We were. But this—" He turned to face her, voice lower now. "They crossed a line we buried in blood. We wrote the rule in fire. And they spat on it." Talia stared at him. "You knew they would." Paul nodded. It had to be them. Someone had to break it for real, so the rest would remember. Her voice dropped. "This wasn't just retaliation." "No," he said. "It was a demonstration." Outside, the stars changed. Ships warped in, silent, unmarked, their surfaces pure obsidian and soundless. The Dominion's neighbors. Rivals. Observers. One by one, they sent surrender pings. Not to Earth. To the women. Paul turned to the final Cassaro officer left alive and conscious. The creature sat on the floor, trembling. "Why?" the officer whispered. "Why go this far?" Paul crouched, setting down his mug beside the creature. "We are what you made us," he said. "You taught us to fear the stars. Then you taught us to fight in them. And then, when we asked only for peace, you stole our mothers, our sisters, our wives, and thought we'd do nothing." He picked up the mug again. "We were raised to finish what others start." The signal from Earth chimed once more. A new message appeared. This one had no encryption, no code, just 5 words, broadcast across every open frequency in the galaxy. "Congratulations. You just signed it." The message blinked, then resolved into a simple image. A galactic map. The Dominion, erased in red. The caption below, "Warrant executed." And above that, the name of the warrant. "In defense of human women." The kitchen smelled like warm iron and scorched plastic. The aprons, once white, were soaked in streaks of maroon. The Dominion's medical bay had become a makeshift triage station, though the only patients left were Cassaro officers trying not to cry as human women handed them compresses and disappointment. Talia wiped her hands on her skirt, then flicked off her calm. Her face was streaked with sweat and soot, but her eyes were calm. She moved from console to console like she still had groceries waiting in her car and didn't want the milk to spoil. A Dominion security commander lay curled near the bulkhead, half-conscious, weeping softly. He looked up as she passed. "You could have just attacked," he rasped. Talia knelt down. "We could have," she said. But then you wouldn't have understood why this matters. He blinked. What is this? She glanced at her apron, still wet, still sticky. This? She asked. This is what happens when you drag mothers into war. We don't send missiles. We send meaning. Across the ship, systems flickered back online. Not Casero systems, but human-coded replacements. Soft UI tones, grandmotherly voices, data logs filled with idioms, warnings, and updates titled, "Bless your heart, but no." Camila stepped in from the corridor. Her eyes were wild, her gloves black with soot. "Paul's on board," she said. "We found him near the main vault. He's not bleeding much. Is he conscious?" Talia asked. He quoted Die Hard at the med team. "So yeah." Talia nodded. "Take me." They walked fast. The halls smelled like burnt arrogance and recycled air. Dominion flags hung limp and shredded. Once smooth walls were spray-painted with names, Earth names, written by steady hands that wanted history to remember who did this and why. They reached the vault. Annette stood guard at the door, arms crossed. A Casero officer knelt behind her, zip-tied and humming softly under his breath as if reciting prayers in Morse code. "He's fine," Annette said before they asked. "Smug, but fine." Talia stepped inside. Paul was seated on a storage crate, blood on his sleeve, a split lip, and the half-smile of a man who had just survived both an interstellar assault and an argument about the correct way to cook lasagna. "Told you they'd overreach," he said, gesturing with a data pad. "Didn't think it'd happen this fast." Talia folded her arms. "You planned this," she said. He shrugged. "No. I just suspected they'd forget what history taught them. And you can't stop gravity. Or stupidity." "They didn't just forget," she replied. "They broadcasted it." Paul's voice lowered. "Then we gave them the ending they asked for." Silence fell for a moment. The kind of silence that came after fire. Quiet, thick with ash and aftershock. Talia stepped closer. "There's one thing I need to know," she said. "Was this just revenge? Or was there something deeper?" Paul looked down at his hands, flexed them once, then passed her the datapad. She read the file. A list of names. Not just the 12 abducted women. Hundreds of others. Coordinates. Transport manifests. Some old. Some recent. Talia's chest tightened. "They've done this before." Paul nodded. "To other species. Quietly. Efficiently. But never to us. Until now." She swallowed. "They thought we wouldn't notice. They thought we wouldn't care." He stood, slow and stiff. "But they picked you. Not because of strength. Because of what you represent. The quiet ones. The overlooked. The patient, the nurturing. The ones who carry peace in their hands, until you teach them to carry fire." Talia met his gaze. "And now?" Paul smiled. Not kindly. "Now the galaxy knows what it means when Earth gets quiet." Alarms whined in the distance. Not distress signals. Notifications. Galactic channels lighting up one by one. Camila called from the hall. We've got comms from 77 species. Most want to surrender. The rest want to learn how to join a PTA." Annette muttered, "Told you the bake sale files would scare them more than war reports." Paul walked past them, heading to the upper deck. "Come on. We need to respond before someone mistakes silence for mercy." They followed. Up on the command deck, screens flickered with incoming requests. Diplomatic pings, reparations offers, desperate translations from species who now feared Earth the way planets fear black holes. Talia stepped forward. She touched the panel. The messages stopped scrolling. "I want to speak," she said. Paul raised an eyebrow. She didn't wait for approval. She tapped the relay. Galactic audio went live. "This is Talia Haynes," she said calmly. "Mother. Widow. Educator. Strategic Defense Specialist. and former chair of my local PTA. Her voice carried across 6 sectors. You didn't just take us. You labeled us property. You violated not just protocol, but decency. You underestimated how dangerous quiet women become when they are forced to fight. She stepped closer to the screen. You're all wondering how many ships Earth has. How many weapons. How many Paul Maddixes. But you're asking the wrong question. She touched the blood on her apron. You should be asking how many of me are out there. How many mothers, sisters, wives, teachers, farmers, fighters. How many of us will stand when others fall? She smiled, though her eyes were tired. You broke the oldest rule. The galaxy listened. And now, we are rewriting the book. She ended the transmission. No threats. No ultimatums. Just truth, delivered with a mother's voice. Paul leaned in beside her. You just made a lot of enemies think twice. No, she said. I made them think first. The lights above flickered again. A message pinged from Earth. Paul opened it. Frowned. Talia read it over his shoulder. It wasn't a debrief. It was a request. A distress call from a human colony along the Centauri edge. Silent for weeks. Signs of abduction. No confirmed survivors. Annette looked between them. They're still doing it. Paul exhaled. Some never learn. Talia looked down at her apron. The blood faded now to rust red. I'll go. No, Paul said. We go. A chorus of affirmations followed. Annette, Camila, Alice, and the rest. There would be no lone reckoning. Not anymore. Outside the viewport, Earth's ships aligned. And as the Dominion homeworld burned behind them, the fleet turned, not to celebrate, not to conquer, but to find whoever was foolish enough to believe this was over. Talia reached for a fresh apron. She would keep the old one. But the next lesson would be taught clean.